Welcome back to the channel. Andrew Marlowe Kermitas here. Today we're going to be doing a little in-depth exploration of Nightwish, the Finnish metal band that was founded in 1995 or 6, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was 1996. And in this video we are going to be sort of discussing not only the history of Nightwish, but also sort of how much they've changed over the years. We're going to be focusing on lyrical content, the lyrical content of the band and how much it has shifted over the years, as well as the lineup changes, the famous controversial lineup changes, as well as some of the other elements of Nightwish that sort of are included in not only the lineup changes and the lyrical changes, but sort of taking Nightwish from point A to point B. Just a disclaimer, most of this is opinion based. Obviously, it's my personal opinion, as well as speculation, as well as what I would like Nightwish to do as a listener and as a fan. Now, I will start this video by saying I'm probably one of the biggest Nightwish fans in the United States. Having said that, I'm not really the type of fan that necessarily goes to every single show. I don't, follow the band, all across the world. I don't buy every single piece of merchandise and that sort of thing. But I am, I have all their albums. I've listened to them ever since 2009, I would say. I was a little late to the game. 2006, I believe, 2007, they came out with Dark Passion Play. And I remember me and my brother and one of our high school friends were sitting around back in the day when there was like sort of a website, or not a website, but there was a certain channel on the television where you could like browse through the different genres of music and order. You had to pay to watch a music video because, obviously they weren't playing any of these metal, sort of music videos on the actual MTV or anything. By that time, MTV had sort of been hijacked by reality shows and all that kind of thing. So we all know about all of that stuff. So we stumbled upon, I want to say it was Bye Bye Beautiful by Nightwish, and we bought it, or we clicked on the video, and I didn't quite know what I was looking at. And I was kind of like that type of deal, like I kind of like the music, I kind of like the imagery, but I still think to this day that was a really bad music video. Most Nightwish fans will probably agree with me in terms of the music video did not really match the spirit of Nightwish, in my opinion. But I think the purpose of the Bye Bye Beautiful music video from the Dark Passion Play album was sort of a tongue-in-cheek, sort of expression from Nightwish and maybe Tuomas and some of the other members of the band, just sort of saying that, we're a different brand, we're a different band now. We have a new singer and a new sound, right? So they were trying different things, but I was sort of put off by the way that they used sort of the female imagery, not necessarily with a net, but just with, like, they had these scenes where they would make you think that the entire band of Nightwish was all women. And it was kind of cute and kind of funny and kind of tongue-in-cheek. And then, every once in a while they would show who the real members were. But it just wasn't a very good music video. And I think they kind of learned from that. And then, of course, we had the really epic music video for the song Amaranth, which was much more in the vein of Nightwish. And I want to say, in addition to The Islander, those are the only 3 music videos I think that they made for that album. So I think they could have either just not have even made the music video for Bye Bye Beautiful, or they could have just skipped it. But I don't want to get too focused on the individual albums themselves, even though we will kind of explore that. But I think what we'll start with is, I'm just going to change the scene here briefly and just kind of give you guys a little bit of imagery. This is currently, obviously, the new lineup of Nightwish. And they've got too many darn members, right? In my opinion, like, it's all good. But we're going to, I guess, most people that are maybe finding this video now, I shouldn't say most, but I would say maybe a decent amount of you are familiar with this lineup that we see right here, which is Floor Jansen, Troy Doneckley, His name is Escape Kai Hato. Don't judge my pronunciations. Tuomas Jalapenian, obviously. Empu Vornian, something like that. And this guy, which I have not really heard his name or read his name enough to really remember off the top of my head. But these two guys right here, Kai and this bass player, are linked because they used to both be in Winter Sun and maybe some other bands. So I think starting with the current Nightwish might be a good place to start. That might sort of put things in perspective instead of starting all the way back from 1996. And we're probably honestly not going to go all the way back to, you know, Angels Fall First or even Oceanborn or even Wishmaster. But just sort of a quick little history lesson about Nightwish. Nightwish was formed by Tuomas Jalapenian. Most of you guys don't really need to hear this story over again. But if you're kind of new to Nightwish, maybe you've heard some of their music, but you don't know the full trajectory of their history. There's this really annoying sort of ad going on here. Let me get rid of that. Got some D&D advertisements. We got all kinds of stuff going on here. This is probably not really the best image here, but I wanted to sort of pull something up with the current lineup. Let's see if we can find a better image here, just for the sake of it, and then we'll get back to what we were talking about. Let's pick this one right here. This one's pretty good. Hopefully the website is not bombarded by advertisements. Okay, that's perfect. It's nice and big, and it kind of Tuomas has got his top hat, which is always great. So anyway, this is the current lineup. Well, actually, no, this is not the current lineup. So this is actually not going to work. That's actually this is the lineup from like 3 years ago when Marco was still in the band. So let me see if I can find another one here. Nightwish current lineup. Because I do think it kind of helps to have a little bit of imagery. This picture should be okay. That's not really a good image. How about this one? I'm afraid this is going to take me back to that same website. Okay, this is actually from the Nightwish website, so this is perfect. Okay, so this is the current Nightwish lineup, and his name is Jukka Koskinen. Jukka Koskinen. So that's kind of weird that they have a new Jukka, or a new Jukka, but it's not the original Jukka, obviously. So we're going to start from the current lineup and kind of rewind backwards. Now, they're coming along in age, right? But that hasn't taken anything away from their music. I mean, their albums are still really, really good albums. But we did have, look, I'm trying to figure out where we should start in terms of Nightwish fans versus newcomers to Nightwish. I mean, and that's a complicated sort of endeavor because everybody kind of finds Nightwish in a different situation or a different lineup. Some people found Nightwish originally, obviously, with the Tarja era of their first 4 albums. And then we had the Annette era, obviously, from 2006, 7-ish to 2012, I want to say. And then we had, obviously, Floor Jansen took over vocals roughly around the early spring of 2012. And she's remained with the band. And we'll get into this at some point, but during all of this, they also had some other lineup changes. So let's go back to the Nightwish history lesson before I start digressing too much. Nightwish was formed by Tuomas Jalapenian here. He is the keyboard player, the songwriter, and sort of the song mastermind, right? And he teamed up with, I want to say, Empu Vornian here to start writing acoustic songs. They started collaborating. And then they got the drummer, Jukka Navalanian, who I don't have a picture of right now, but we'll get to him. Most Nightwish fans know about the original drummer. My brother and I used to call him the Pirate. He had, like, you know, the bandana wrapped around his head. And just like, he was just like so awesome behind the drum kit, right? Just really looked like he was into what he was doing. He looked like a pirate. And then we had, roughly after that, we had Tardia Tarunian. A little rough on my pronunciations. Finnish is a tough language, my friends. And then I want to say they hired like maybe a bass player for the first couple shows or something like that. And then they hired a gentleman named Sami Vaska, who played bass with them for the first 3 albums, I want to say. Or no, he only played on the first. He only played on the second and the third album. I'm sorry. So there was really no official bass player on Angels Fall First, which was Nightwish's debut album. I think maybe Empu Viornian probably played the bass or something like that. Maybe Tuomas played the bass, whoever. And then by the time Oceanborn came around, they had like a full-fledged band consisting of Tuomas here, Empu, Tadia, and Sami Vaska, in addition to Jukka Navalanian. And then we had the Wishmaster album. And like I said, I'm not going to get too stuck on the old albums, but we'll kind of go back and forth, just kind of talking stylistically about what changed, what happened with the band Nightwish from an outsider perspective. And then they had the Wishmaster album, which kind of was their big breakthrough. Oceanborn was also a breakthrough, but I would say that Wishmaster was the album that broke them through to sort of the metal masses, at least within Finland and Europe at that time. Wishmaster was released in 2000, I want to say it was 2000, because Angels Fall First, their first album, was released in 1996. And then I believe Oceanborn was 98. And then by the time we got to Wishmaster, it was either 99 or 2000. Or it might have even been 2001. I'm pretty sure it was 2000, though. And then that original formation of Nightwish, that being Tuomas, Jukka, Tadia, Empu, and Sami. And technically, Sami Vaska was not the original. He wasn't like an original member, but he was on the first 2, on the third and the second and the third album, right? So then some drama went down with Sami Vaska. They were having trouble on tour or whatever. And I'm saying this just from like an outsider perspective. I read the Nightwish biography, and I read copious amounts of interviews and stuff like that, but there were some tensions, creative musical tensions with Sami Vaska, at some point. And then allegedly, they were unpacking from tour or something from the one of the Wishmaster tours, and I guess they were unpacking at Tuomas's house or something to that effect, or Tuomas's parents were helping them unpack somewhere. And it was alleged that Sami Vaska was like hoarding porn magazines or something like that. This is their original bass player. And then Tuomas's mother, I guess, discovered what they, opened up Sami Vaska's suitcase or his tour bag or something and saw that all those magazines were in there. And I guess she wasn't too happy. And it was probably pretty embarrassing for Tuomas as well. So, and obviously that probably was not the main the main factor in the firing of Sami Vaska, but he was let go shortly after that incident, or shortly after one of the tours for Wishmaster ended, right? So we're going to fast forward to 2000, maybe late 2001, or maybe it was all the way. Yeah, I'm sure it was either early 2002 or late 2001 where Sami Vaska was out of the picture, and there were some other tensions in the band between maybe Tuomas and Empu Viornen, the guitar player. Empu claimed that he was starting to feel like a hired gun, and I think that was even, if you read the Nightwish biography, you'll sort of discover that there was a little bit of a misunderstanding of how much creative input some of the other members were going to have. And I think perhaps maybe Empu was maybe hoping to write more songs or bring in more riffs or something, which he did. They're a very collaborative band to a point, but when push comes to shove, Tuomas Holopainen is pretty much the main, like I said, the mastermind, and he might take a little bit from here, a little bit from this guy, a little bit from that guy, but he kind of wants to, in most cases, be the sole contractor for the songwriting process as well as the lyrics. Now there are exceptions, like songs like The Islander and Whomever Brings the Night, was written by Empu Vornian. And even maybe something like, you can sort of almost tell the songs that are more Empu driven, like something like, I'm trying to think, like something from the Century Child album, like, what's that really heavy song off of that record? Slaying the Dreamer, that's probably one of Empu's songs, 50% at least, or maybe almost 100%, because it's very guitar driven. Tuomas, to my knowledge, does not really play guitar, so anytime you hear a song from Nightwish that's mostly structured around the guitar, it's probably Empu. Maybe he just doesn't really get the credit or something. Or maybe Marco used to write some of those riffs on his bass. Marco wrote a lot of material. Marco has been in the music industry for quite some time. So anyway, we're digressing a little bit, but by the time, so we sort of left off with the all the drama that went down with Sammy Vaska, who was the original bass player for Nightwish. They recorded the Wishmaster album, and then they came home from tour, and there was some drama or whatever, some creative tensions. And Tuomas actually, I actually forgot about this, but Tuomas Holopainen actually wanted to quit the band temporarily. I'm not sure how serious this endeavor was, but he was overwhelmed from touring. He was maybe, tired of the drama in the band and sort of falling victim to the rigors of the music industry, like we all do, right? And he was about to quit the band, and he was about to just, say, okay, maybe we'll do another album, maybe we'll record a little bit here and there, but I don't want to tour anymore, right? I think we've all been there as musicians. Most of us are still there. Most of us haven't played a concert or gone back out on tour for some time, because of just the sheer amount of stress that it does take to be in a band and to work with 5 different people. But I guess one of Tuomas's friends, he was out hiking in the mountains or something, and the guy sort of convinced him. I forgot who the guy was. He was like another musician from another band or something. But Tuomas sort of like thought, okay, well, I really don't want to quit Nightwish. We've come too far. So he decided to continue Nightwish, but the conditions were that they were going to hire a manager, as well as there was going to be a lineup change, and that's kind of when Sammy Vaska was given the boot, right? He was kicked out, and I don't want to get into the full details of how they fired him, but Tuomas and some of the other members said that they were always ashamed of how they fired him, because they basically called him up, or they didn't even call him. They had their manager, Empu, no, his name is not Empu. What's his name? Their manager's name is... It's escaping me at the moment. If I saw a picture of him, I could think of his name, but I saw him walking by at one of the Nightwish concerts. I'm like, that's the Nightwish manager. But I'll think of his name in a little bit. It's something like Empu, but it's not Empu. What is that guy's name? Anyway, they had that guy call, or somebody called, and it wasn't any of the members of the band. Maybe they were in the background or something. But anyway, make a long story short, they always felt kind of ashamed about the way that they fired Sammy Vaska or whatever, right? So make a long story short, they got Marco Hitalia from Tarot, and as well as some other bands. Marco's been around since like the early 80s, right? Late 70s. He's like, the grandfather Finnish metal guy that everybody probably wants in their band. And Marco kind of, he was introduced to Nightwish because Nightwish was kind of up and coming. And I think Tarot, or one of Marco's other bands, was touring at the time, and they were touring with Nightwish, or did a few shows with Nightwish or something. And Marco Hitalia got along really well with with Tuomas and, Empu and Tadia, obviously, and Yuka and all that stuff. So, my suspicion is that they sort of already knew, obviously they knew who Marco was and they really liked him and they were having problems with Sammy. So, the thing with Nightwish is you always have to kind of speculate how much are these lineup changes, premeditated, or how much are they just kind of spur of the moment. I don't think we'll ever know for sure, but lineup changes or breakups, they tend to sort of be somewhat premeditated, right? They don't just fall out of the sky, Lineup changes, especially in bands, are sort of the result of, unconsolable tension, whether it's musical differences or just personality differences and stuff like that. So Marco came to the band in, like I said, maybe late 2001, but by the time 2002 rolled around, he was obviously in the band, right? And in 2002, they released, I'll see if I can show you a picture here. I'm not sure how this is going to do with double layers. So they released in 2002 this amazing album called Century Child, which is still, in my opinion, probably the best out of the Tardia era. This image is kind of blurry, but in my opinion, this is probably the best Tardia era Nightwish album. And it looks like this. I'm not sure what this is, just a used copy from Amazon, but there was something about this album that like pushed Nightwish to another level. But having said that, it wasn't the same Nightwish from Wishmaster or Oceanborn, and obviously wasn't the same Nightwish from Angels Fall First. Angels Fall First, which, like I said, was their debut album, was more like an acoustic sort of folk metal, D&D type thing. Like, it just sounds like a bunch of nerds that got together and wrote songs about Tutankhamun and elves and J.R. Tolkien and stuff. And they had, Tadia's vocals obviously over it. And with each sequential album, the band, got progressively better. By the time we got to Oceanborn from 1998, I want to say, or maybe, 1998. I'm a little fuzzy on some of the dates. I'm pretty sure it was 1998. They were this full-fledged, or at least 95% of the way there, this full-fledged epic, really fast technical power metal, gothic power metal band. It wasn't even quite gothic yet, but we were sort of getting little hints of that. By the time we got to Wishmaster kind of felt like sort of a watered down version of Oceanborn, right? Like, it was a good album. It has some amazing songs on there. The production is really good. But sort of the overall aesthetic of the album wasn't quite as maybe dark or maybe quite as perfect like Oceanborn was, but it was still a really good album. And by the time we got to this album here, Century Child, there was a little bit of a change of style. The pacing of the songs, like the tempo of the songs, sort of slowed down a little bit. It was still really heavy, lots of double bass. They still had some power metal-esque elements to it. But if you get sort of like halfway through the album, even after like the third song on Century Child, the album sort of slows down and it sort of becomes this almost different style, and you sort of get a lot of different influences from like movie soundtracks, as well as like pipes, like Scottish pipes, not bagpipes per se, but sort of like, I forgot that thing that Troy Donockley plays. Irish pipes or something. I think I'm butchering what they actually are, but there's like that folk, that Celtic sound that Nightwish is obviously known for. That sort of came into play roughly around this album. We had songs like Forever Yours, I think it's called. It kind of sounds like the song from Titanic. And then we had just like epic, so that the album Century Child is just a huge encyclopedic sort of mishmash, I guess you could say, of what Nightwish was and what they were becoming at this time. And not only the sound of the music, my cat's bothering me here. Not only was the actual sound of the music changing, but they had Marco in the band playing bass, and he didn't play with his fingers like Sammy Vaska used to do, but he played with a pick. So it was maybe a little more like they had this really fuzzy, like chunky vibe to the bass, which was never a thing with Nightwish before. It was just like this real chuggy. It wasn't quite the same sort of, because like as a bass player, as a musician, you can sort of start to decipher what it sounds like when a bass player plays with his fingers versus what it sounds like when a guy is playing with a pick. And it's sort of like, it's not that one is better than the other or anything like that, but it's just that it's a different sort of sound, right? So anyway, Marco played with a pick, but Marco was obviously one hell of a vocalist too, and he contributed a lot of really great vocal material to Century Child. So I don't want to get stuck too much on Century Child, but I think in a lot of ways Century Child was like the Nightwish album. It was the album that they were maybe trying to make that they couldn't make with Sammy. And prior to that, the most of the vocals were obviously covered by Tautia, but they did collaborate with male vocalists going all the way back to their first album, Angels Fall First, where Tuomas Holopainen himself actually contributed some vocals, to The Carpenter as well as Beauty and the Beast, which I think are actually brilliant. It's too bad Tuomas didn't stick with the vocals because he might have been quite good at it. But by the time we got to Oceanborn, their second album, they had a different guy. I think he might have been from Sana Arctica or something like that, one of those Finnish bands. But he kind of had like a gruff voice, but he was almost like maybe sort of death or black metal-esque. Maybe a little too heavy for what they were looking for. And they did some shows with him on, the End of Innocence DVD. I think he's on there, getting on stage with them and stuff. And my cat is like really clingy. What's up, Pete? We'll talk later, all right? I got you. Haven't quite figured out if my cat Pete likes metal yet, but we're trying to get him into it. So like I said, the vocalist that collaborated with them on their second album and on their third, rather, I forgot his name, actually. I probably should have researched it, but you guys all know who I'm talking about. He did like the Kinslayer, and he did those great tracks off of Oceanborn and stuff like that. He has a very distinctive voice. I want to say he's from Sana Arctica, but I might be mixing the band name up. So anyway, he kind of disappeared from the Nightwish camp, and then they had Marco, and they didn't need anybody or anything else as far as the male vocalist was concerned. Now, Marco is not like a death metal vocalist. He's like this just amazing power metal, sort of Broadway-esque opera male vocalist. Like, he's just got the most beautiful male metal voice I've probably ever heard. And this is sort of where the trajectory of the band sort of changes, is they started touring with Century Child, and then somewhere along the way, I'll pull up a picture of Tautia here for you. Somewhere along this period, this is actually a really great picture right here, if I can get it big enough. So as you can see here, only necessary. Okay, so this is Tautia Turunen. This is Nightwish's original vocalist, and somewhere along the line, it could have been maybe earlier than Century Child, but she met this guy. I believe he's Argentinian or something. His name is Marcello Cabuli. But anyway, they hit it off, and they started a romantic relationship. And most of the details, I would say, within reason, are documented in the biography of Nightwish that you can read. Just want to make sure this is still recording here. Looks good. I don't want to have all this effort go to vain and not have it record. So they hit it off, obviously. Really cute picture of them there, but maybe we'll digress a little bit from this relationship specifically. We'll get into this a little bit more. But so they released Century Child, right? And that was a really good album for them. But they did not, Nightwish was not really the Nightwish that we're all aware of until they came out with the album Once. And the album Once totally changed the musical style, in my opinion. We sort of lost that epic power metal sort of sound to Nightwish. You know, they had some heavy songs, but it was more like Metallica meets Rammstein or something like that is kind of how I would maybe describe the album Once. And even some of the albums after that we'll get into. So the album Once had some really huge singles like Nemo, obviously, I Wish I Had an Angel. They did some amazing collaborations with this Native American flute player, but it turns out he wasn't actually Native American from most of the sources that I've read. And like some of the chanting that he was doing on there was just like, you know, hogwash or something. But it's still a beautiful song. It's called Creek Mary's Blood, and Tuomas wrote this beautiful song about the Trail of Tears and stuff like that. I think his name was Johnny Two Hawks or something like that. But anyway, there's some controversy surrounding him. Nightwish just seems to either attract really bad controversy, or they just can't help themselves in the situations that they get into. So we'll get back to these people here. We have Tarja Turunen and Marco Tabuli. And Marco Tabuli basically sort of came onto the scene as not only Tarja's boyfriend, from what I understand. Like what I'm saying, like before I start talking bad about people that I have never met or that I don't know, I'm saying that most of this is coming from what I've read, from what I've watched, and just from my own speculation. So I'm not saying it's 100% true. But Marcello Cabuli came onto the scene not only as Tarja Turunen's lover, but he also came onto the Nightwish camp as like, you know, I can help you guys get really big. I can help you sell merch. I can do this. I can do that. But really what kind of was going on was he was talking into Tarja's ear, basically telling her how great she was and that she didn't really need Nightwish. And I'm not sure if this was all Marcello's doing. You know, obviously most of, Tarja has an ego. I think that's pretty plain as day. And so things sort of the veneer started to crack. You know, there was something rotten in the state of Nightwish, you know, as if you will. Something rotten in the state of Denmark, a little Shakespeare reference there. But there was something starting to get foul in the state of Nightwish. And you know, everybody knows about that plane ride between Tuomas and Tarja. We'll talk a little bit about that. But we'll also talk about a show. I forgot where it was. I want to say it was somewhere in Brazil, maybe. And they were touring, and the security was not so good. And allegedly, Tarja claims that they were playing their set, and some guy ran up on stage and basically kind of sexually assaulted her. I don't really know exactly what took place. But maybe she got felt up or something, or maybe they just tackled her to the floor. But he was like a really deranged fan or something, right? And Tarja Turunen never really got over that because she said that the band, all the guys in Nightwish just kept playing. You know, because that's how professional they are. Like, even if the singer gets tackled, we're just going to keep playing, right? So they kept playing, and I think that's when the resentment really really came to a head. And she claims that this fella here, Marco Tabuli, this is a really old picture of these people, but Marcello Cabuli was the only guy that really came to her aid. He was the one that comforted her and all this kind of stuff. So that led to some tensions, and obviously they were touring a lot. They had people telling them how great they were, and that's really the worst thing to happen to a band is when they become successful, right? Because everything kind of like, it's good for them in some ways, but in other ways they start to sort of decay, right? And that's pretty much what happened with Nightwish. Egos really got in the way, and things started to sort of crumble from within. And there's probably a lot of other details that I'm forgetting, but you know, I think there was even alleged that Empu wanted to jump ship at different points. Even Marco wanted to jump ship. There was just so much tension, right? And then there was a mysterious plane ride that took place. I forgot where it was. It's all documented in the book, right? It's actually hard to get a physical copy of the book. And speaking about books, I will just sort of shamelessly plug my literature channel. It's called In-Depth Literature. If you guys are interested in historical fiction or just, you know, fiction, novels, biographies, conspiracy books, please check out the channel called In-Depth Literature. I think you guys will enjoy it. But today we're going to be talking about Nightwish and the Finnish sort of metal world. I might make a whole video about like what my background in metal is, because some of you guys might be asking like, what does this guy know about Nightwish, right? But anyway, so they were taking a plane ride, right? And there was a conversation taking place between Tautia and Tuomas Halopeinen, the founding member of the band. He's the guy that wears the top hat and writes all the songs and plays the keyboard, right? And something transpired, and she basically said, I could leave Nightwish tomorrow. I don't need you guys, basically. And that was sort of like the final straw. Like, obviously, there were tensions building up before that. Like, this guy, from what I understand and what I suspect and what I speculate, is that he's very controlling, and somehow he got under Tautia's spell, or Tautia fell under his spell, rather, vice versa. And they were just sort of a toxic duo, I think. You know, Tautia has this ego, as talented as she is. You know, she does, you know, she thinks she's God's gift to you know, singing, I guess, and which she is, right? She's extremely talented, but she is a little bit, you know, I would assume she's narcissistic. I don't know if that's true. I'm just sort of going on you know, what I've heard from the band members of Nightwish and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen interviews of her, and she seems like a normal person. And we'll talk about some of I don't want this video to come across like I'm attacking Tautia or Marcello, because we'll get into some of the issues with Tuomas and some of the other band members, perhaps, that we could possibly speculate on. But obviously, Marcello Kabuli was talking in her ear, and maybe she would have never said anything like that if it wasn't for Marcello Kabuli. But anyway, there were a lot of other tensions too, because, and I don't blame Tautia for this at all, but if you've ever been in a band with 4 or 5 guys, that's bad enough, right? But imagine being the only woman in a band with 4 or 5 guys. You know, she didn't like staying up late. She didn't like dealing with drunk people on the bus. You know, she said that the smoking and the drinking would fuck up her throat, you know, on tour. And you know, it's amazing they lasted as long as they did, really, because there was such a huge demand for them. I mean, Nightwish is pretty much like the Nickelback of Finland. I don't say that to say like their musical styles or anything alike, but they're that big. You know, they're like the biggest, you know, musical export, or not biggest musical export, but probably one of the biggest metal musical exports from Finland, right? You know, they're pretty damn popular, and they probably have a lot of haters too, because they're so melodic and they're not like real heavy. They're not super, I would say they're pretty niche, but they're not like extreme. But in some ways they are extreme. You know, if you show the average person Nightwish, they're going to kind of think, oh, this is pretty heavy. This is pretty weird. Why do they have this epic female vocalist and the rest of the guys look like heavy metalers? And who's the weird keyboard guy that looks like Jack Sparrow? And who's the bass player that looks like Gandalf? And who's the pirate behind the drum set? And who's the little elf that plays guitar? And so they are a very weird band. But having said that, like, they're more like in the vein of Iron Maiden or Metallica or something. Like they're like that big. They are that big. But anyway, so that conversation transpired on the plane ride. I forgot where it was going to. But after that, basically Tuomas sort of fell into silence. And it's kind of like what he says in Dark Passion Play, where he says, silence took me. Marco is singing those lyrics, silence took me, because like there was no more room for communication. So that's basically the first trajectory of sort of the drama, and there's a lot of other details about. Obviously, everybody knows about the open letter that was given to Tadia after the end of an era DVD. They did this huge concert DVD, and this is sort of where we get into some of my speculations about Tuomas. And I love Tuomas. You know, I've seen him play on stage. I've never actually met the guy, but he's very immensely talented and he's very inspiring. But I think this video will hopefully address some questions that I think a lot of fans might be having that maybe have never really spoken publicly about it. But they wrote Tadia an open letter that was signed by all the band members, basically saying, you know, it's a really long letter. I could get into it, but I think most of the Nightwish people have probably already read it. And it basically puts Tadia and Marcello Cabulli on blast, and basically says that the trajectory of where they were going was no longer going to be feasible because Tadia's ego had gotten way out of control, and she was basically a slave to Marcello Cabulli and all this kind of stuff. And that would be a whole nother topic for a whole nother video, right? Like just discussing the drama between Marcello Cabulli and Tadia Tarunian and Tuomas and all that. And, you know, obviously they had management and record companies talking in their ear, and it's like it's a wonder they never actually broke up officially. But they kind of almost did, because so before I interrupt myself, they made this documentary slash concert DVD called End of an Era, I think it's called. I used to have it. I watched it on Christmas Eve way back when I was in my early college days back in upstate New York, and it was like a snowstorm outside, and I'll never forget it. And it was just it left a really big impression on me. But I will say that the way that the documentary was sort of constructed, it was sort of like this behind the scenes hinting at what was going to happen, but they didn't actually tell you. And there's no real indication that they were going to fire Tadia, and maybe that decision was rather spree of the moment. But if you look at the history of Nightwish, there does seem to be this really, really bad, toxic lack of communication that builds up to this. And I understand that because I'm an introvert and I hate confrontation. I'm a Libra and all that kind of stuff. And my aggression or my anger comes out in other ways. And I'll just avoid the conversation for as long as I possibly can, just kind of hoping and keeping my fingers crossed that people are going to change, which they never ever do. Maybe that's what Tuomas was hoping for. I think Tuomas felt like he was backed into a corner, right? That's pretty much what happened with Tuomas here. We'll get back to the picture of this is the current lineup of Nightwish. And like I said, we were going to start from the beginning, but we've kind of gotten to the reverse. We've kind of gone back into the history of Nightwish, and we're kind of slowly fast forwarding. But this is all really, really important stuff to cover by the time we get to this new lineup here. So we'll just briefly go back to Tadia and Marcello Cabulli here. And so we had the open letter and we had the DVD. But why would they record this? Just the title of the DVD in itself, End of an Era, and then they make a documentary kind of documenting the last. They literally recorded like in between the shows, like maybe the last 8 or 9, 10 shows before the final show, and we all know damn well that like they were planning on firing Tadia way before the final show where this DVD was made. I think it was recorded in either Kitty or the capital of Finland. I can't think of the capital of Finland at the moment. What is the capital of Finland? I want to say it's on the tip of my tongue. Helsinki. I think it might have actually been recorded in Helsinki, but I can't actually remember. Whether it was Kitty or Hell, I think they were actually formed. The entire band Nightwish was formed in Kitty. I think I don't know how to pronounce that, but I think the actual, yeah, because if you watch the interviews from End of an Era, you'll see like this is 5 days before the Helsinki show, or this is 12 days before the Helsinki. So I'm pretty sure it's Helsinki, big capital. I don't know how big it is, rather, but this is like the capital of Finland, right? And this is where they were doing their final concert. It looks like a really epic place. So that's where the final Nightwish concert took place, and then shortly after, maybe like a half an hour, within a half an hour or an hour of the show, they did their behind the stage, they did their final group hug or whatever, and then before Tautia kind of took off, they gave her the final letter. Now, it's pretty obvious that Tautia was already planning on leaving the band, right? Like she was basically threatening to quit Nightwish, but she never actually like left them empty-handed. You know, she always showed up to the shows. She always did her duties, I presume. So either maybe Nightwish and Tuomas fired her out of fear, or it was already premeditated just from the betrayal, right? And that's something that, like, I'm taking into account. Obviously, there was a lot of betrayal, but it does seem like there's a little bit something weird in the state of the psychology of Nightwish to record an entire documentary called End of an Era, knowing you're making a documentary about firing your singer. It's a little bit weird, and it's almost like maybe they were like playing on the whole sort of like drama thing on the internet before that was even a thing. You know, like back then it was just like message boards and chat rooms and maybe some comments on their website. But Nightwish has always been really good at creating drama. Maybe it's from no fault of their own, you know, but they always have really interesting drama. Not so much nowadays, but even still nowadays, they still have some drama. Let me see how long this video is getting here. We're going on for almost an hour. We're doing pretty good. We'll try to wrap this up in another 40 minutes or so. See how long we go. So they made this documentary. You guys should watch it. It's called End of an Era. It's a slash concert DVD, right? And then they fired Tautia Turunian with the open letter, basically saying that, you know, we can't hack this anymore, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, like I said, we can make a whole nother video just about the open letter itself, but I think we'll save that for another time. Save that for another time for the sake of time, really is what I should have said, because it is pretty lengthy and it would open up just so many different cans of worms. But, so after the Once out, that was like Nightwish's biggest album. It's kind of a tragedy because that album was like their biggest album with Tautia, with the original, with the semi-original lineup, right? Up until Tautia left or was kicked out. And then Tautia did some, you know, news conferences where she was crying and basically saying that, you know, it came out of left field. She didn't know that she was going to be fired, blah, blah, blah. And some of that could have been played up for the media, right? And I think Nightwish is very, very good at sort of manipulating the media of Finland and as well as the metal scene in general. You know, I'm sort of a conspiracy theorist. I'm always thinking people are premeditating everything, but I do think some things do happen organically. So anyway, and like during that process, when they were planning on firing Tautia, Empu said, you know, we can't do this. You know, if Tautia leaves, then, you know, Nightwish is going to be over. But somehow they all collectively sort of, you know, managed to stick together and realize that Tautia was maybe dragging them down or something. But I also think, like, and here's where we jump to Dark Passion Play. We'll get into it here. Just got to type this in. Promo photos. Okay, so this is their next album that came out in 2007, pretty early 2007. This is Dark Passion Play. Obviously, you guys can see the cover of the album. Let me just make sure I'm closing my OBS for this, because I think you do have to close OBS or something. I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I'm trying. So this is the new line. This is the second vocalist lineup, right? If we can get this picture here. This is the second lineup from 2000. they were sort of recorded the album during they took like an entire year to audition vocalists, right, from like late 2005 maybe even all the way to early 2007 or something. But I think they already had their vocalist, who was Annette Olsland from Sweden. She's a Swedish singer. She used to be in a band called Allison Avenue, I believe. But anyway, she sort of sounds like one of the singers from ABBA or something like that. You can definitely tell there's a real heavy ABBA influence with her vocals, or at least that's just what I'm speculating. Because ABBA was like the biggest band from Sweden, right? So there's no doubt that, but she definitely has that really warm, beautiful, sort of innocent, girlish voice that you would hear from one of the singers from ABBA. So this is like the lineup from 2006 while they were recording Dark Passion Play up until, and we'll get into that whole drama too when the time comes. So anyway, they recorded this really brilliant album called Dark Passion Play. This is the cover here, and this was the first Nightwish album that I actually ever heard. Really cool album cover. And I sort of just picked this up at the supermarket. Like, obviously I sort of knew about the some of the singles from that album. Like I told you guys, I watched some of the music videos at home, but like at first I was like, Nightwish is like the corniest, the most silliest thing I've ever heard. But I was watching another like compilation of Finnish metal bands or something. At the time, it was like back in the fall. I remember it was like the fall of 2009, right after I had graduated, and they played the Amaranth music video, and then I was like automatically hooked. I was like, okay, there's another Nightwish song, and this one's better than the last one that I heard. Not necessarily that the song was better, but the music video was better. This was like, okay, this is something I can get behind. So I went out and bought this album, Dark Passion Play, and I've basically been a pretty darn huge Nightwish fan ever since, up until kind of recently, and we'll sort of talk about that. So they recorded this album with Annette Olsland called Dark Passion Play, and everything seemed to be pretty good. They were doing lots of promos. Everybody's, the band seemed to be happy. They had a new sound. And this just sort of a quick antidote before we discuss some of the continuing drama with Nightwish. But if you listen to songs like, I think it's called Until Her Last Breath, I want to say it's called. But anyway, if you listen to a lot of the songs on Dark Passion Play, it has an element of Evanescence to it. Okay? Not only in the vocals, but sort of the song structures. Like, they're very sort of, Nightwish is sort of moving out of this sort of gothic. They've long left the power metal, epic power metal stuff, sort of Stradivarius influences. They've left that long on the Wishmaster album, right? Had a little bit of that with Century Child, but by the time we got to the album Once from 2004, I want to say, it was more of like, we had some gothic elements, but it was more of just a really heavy metal Rammstein sort of thing. But a lot of other elements too. I'm not saying Nightwish sounds like Rammstein at all, because they don't, but it was more of like, I don't even know how to describe it. We'll have to make a whole nother video about the exact specifics of how Nightwish's sound actually changed. But by the time we got to Dark Passion Play, like, the album opens up with this epic, grandiose, amazing song called, God, what's it called? The Poet and the Pendulum. And when I heard that song, I'm like, this band is really unique. This band is really doing something different. And like, but anyway, as the album progresses, you can sort of hear like a more like American, maybe Evanescence influence to it. And I can't help but think that maybe Tuomas was sort of premeditating some of this at maybe on some level. Maybe it was subconscious or whatever, but he was like, okay, I really like this band, Evanescence. you know, maybe he's never really listened to Evanescence. I don't know, but if you listen to some of the songs on that album, it sounds like he was trying to emulate Evanescence. And I think Nightwish still does Evanescence way better than Evanescence does. You know, nobody can really beat Nightwish at anything they do, but I can't help but think that somewhere along the line, two of us really wanted a different singer. His emotions were changing. Maybe he wanted to go in a little bit different direction with not only his lyrics, which he did on Dark Passion Play. It's mostly just about his emotions, and you know, we have some folk songs on there, and we have The Islander by Marco. But really, what Dark Passion Play is Tuomas's sort of depression after, you know, the tours, and after the firing of Tautia sort of came to rest. Tuomas took like a year off, and he was like almost suicidal or something, evidently. But also another quick interesting anecdote that I forgot to mention about Nightwish is that they all kind of knew each other from the Finnish military, which, you know, I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but, you know, they obviously had some type of connections in the military sort of society. You know, that's definitely a thing in the music business. If you check out my other channel called In-Depth Literature, you'll be able to read a little bit more between the lines, you know, about the military and the music business itself. So anyway, they had this new singer, Annette Olsland, but right off the bat, like, you know, the album came out in 2007, and they started touring, and then by the time 2009 came around, they came out with this live album. It was called Things Made in Hong Kong and Other Places or something like that. It was like a live album, but it came with like this 50-minute or 45-minute documentary, again documenting sort of the issues that they were having with the band. And this is when I sort of realized that Nightwish was like courting controversy. Like, this is what they sort of enjoy doing. And I do think this is a little bit of a narcissistic trait in Tuomas Halopainen. I do think there's a little bit of narcissism going on here that nobody I mean, I think people have discussed it in the comment sections and stuff like that, but I never actually heard like a YouTuber talk about it. You know, just the whole narcissism thing is like a whole nother topic for another video, right? But not only with like his lyrical content, which is awesome, and this kind of brings me to my next thing. My next thing is that like the Nightwish that Tuomas wrote mostly about himself, that's the Nightwish that I actually prefer. So the narcissism thing doesn't have so much to do with the music or the lyrics, although that is a small part of it. But the narcissism is more like the way that he seeks out controversy, the way that he documents the toxic dynamics in his band. You know, there's something a little strange about it. I'm not sure where that influence is coming from. Maybe it's coming from their manager. I almost remembered his name, but I still can't remember it. Ewo. His name is Ewo, or Ewo. I'm not sure how you pronounce it in Finland, but it's E-W-O. Ewo. So maybe Ewo just kind of started picking up the camera and said, you know, we could really make something out of this, you know, way back when he was filming some other drama from the Century Child era or whatever. So I mean, Nightwish has been making like self-indulgent documentaries for quite some time, but you know, I think there's something to be said for like documenting. You know, all bands like to document drama, right? I mean, Aerosmith has done it all the way back since, you know, the making of the Pump album from 1989. So it's not like anything new, but I do think it's sort of like, it's like a, what do you call it? It's a not wishful thinking, but it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like when you're making a documentary about all your band drama, like shit is bound to go south, right? So anyway, they started kind of like documenting Annette Olsland and like started filming her, and it's a little weird. Like I gotta say, like that documentary, Made in Hong Kong and various other places, like it's a great documentary. But there's this one scene where I assume it's Ewo, the manager. I'm pretty sure it is, and he's sort of like filming Annette Olsland, and she's backstage trying to comb her hair and put on makeup and stuff. And she seems really stressed, and she seems like she doesn't really want to be in front of the camera. And they're sort of grilling her about this incident that happened on stage where she was sitting down and all of a sudden she walked off stage, right? And that was like a big blow to Nightwish, because that was during the time when everybody had cell phones. And of course, all their fans from that show like started uploading videos, you know, Annette Olsland walks off stage, Nightwish, you know, canceled show or whatever. And then Marco kind of took over the vocals. I don't know exactly what transpired after that initial, you know, sort of what transpired at that actual concert, whether they actually canceled the whole show or whether they did a couple songs with Marco. But anyway, and I think some of the actual details are escaping me, but she said actually in the DVD that there was one of the smoke machines was misplaced, and the whole story just did not add up at all. She claims there was a smoke machine in her face, and she couldn't breathe, so she walked off stage. And I think that was really a cover for a lot of other stuff that was going on in the band. She claimed that when they went to South America, that the security was really bad, and she was actually being stalked by fans that were showing up at the lobby. They were banging on her door at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you know, there was something sketchy going on in you know, a big band like Nightwish. You would think that like they had like amazing security, but like when you go to foreign countries, like even if you're a big metal band, like sometimes the security is not that good. So things were sort of starting to fall apart in South America in particular, I think. They had toured Europe and stuff, and by this time it was maybe early mid 2008. And the initial enthusiasm of Dark Passion Play, like they went on like almost a 3-year tour for that, which was ridiculous for like a new singer. And this woman, Annette Olsland right here, had never really seen the grandiosity of the metal scene. You know, she was like, you know, not, maybe a little bigger than a local singer, but she was more like a regional underground musician. She didn't really know what she was getting into, right? Touring with Nightwish, and she was stuck on a bus with all these weird Finnish guys that didn't talk. And I mean, I probably would have lost my mind too. You know, they do seem a little strange on a different, you know, you can watch some of their DVDs to see kind of how strange individuals they are. But there was something odd about the way that Iwu or whoever was behind the whole idea was filming her. Almost like they were trying to just get her to talk, or they were trying to get her to come up with a good story to explain why she walked off stage. And there's a lot of speculation that she was like maybe pregnant during that tour, or she was having a nervous breakdown from the Dark Passion Play tour. That's really what was going on. But for some reason they didn't even want to get into that, because it would take focus off of Nightwish. They didn't want to give Annette Olsland any like narcissistic supply, right? Or any like, they didn't want to give her the green light, or they didn't want to give her any validation perhaps. So they kind of construed this story. And maybe it does seem like a little bit of like Stockholm syndrome. Like Annette Olsland, it seems a little bit uncomfortable during that interview. And she said that, you know, the fans were kind of rude to her, and sometimes they would, you know, give her the middle finger during shows. And I think like things were starting to kind of crumble, and they might have broken up maybe at that time, but somehow they managed to stay together. But they sort of concocted this story that there was a misplaced smoke machine, which was obviously complete bullshit. So, and then we fast forward. We're going to fast forward a little bit here to kind of, you know, speed up the trajectory here. But so they recorded the Dark Passion Play album. They did that tour. They did that documentary. They did all this stuff, right? And then by the time we got to their next album, it's called Imaginarum. We have some more drama that comes up, and this is what they kind of looked like during the Imaginarum era, which I think it's a tough call between Imaginarum and Dark Passion Play. in terms of what a net album is really the best. I mean, I would say Imaginarum is just a great masterpiece. And in a lot of ways, this is where we want to be with this discussion, because Imaginarum was kind of, in my opinion, the last Nightwish album with the Nightwish that we kind of knew, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But during the recording of this album was really delayed. Like, they stopped touring from Dark Passion Play, I want to say like in 2008, or maybe it was 2009. They did some festivals and stuff like that, but this album did not come out until 2011. I want to say it was like I think it was January or February of 2011. So it was, we're talking, the Dark Passion Play came out in 2007, so we're talking 2008, 2009, 2010. So this album here didn't come out for 4 years. And that's something Nightwish does, is like, their albums are so epic and so grandiose that they can't, you know, I understand why it takes so long to make their albums, but I do think that the band, it does hurt them a little bit that, like, how unprolific they are. And I'm not saying that they're not prolific, but I'm saying that, like, it does take them sometimes 4, 5, and 6 years to make albums. And, like, I do think that causes a lot of stress on the band. And, like, I think they've toured, like, extensively, which is cool, but they could have came out with much more albums if they weren't, like, constantly touring. And I think that's partially why they've had so many problems, is because they're addicted to touring. You know, they're probably addicted to the adrenaline and all that stuff. But they just toured their balls and their coochies off or whatever, and they just were touring and touring. And every, like, you know, every 4 to 5 years, if you're lucky, you'll get a Nightwish album. Usually it's every 3 to 4, you know. I'm trolling a little bit there, but it takes them forever to make albums, right? And that's kind of how Nightwish is. They're not the same thing as, like, Serenia, where, you know, Serenia bangs out an album like once a year or something, you know, which is really cool. But maybe that's a little too frequent. But I would expect a band to at least come out with an album every 2 years, right? But no, with Nightwish, you get an album like every 4 or 5 years sometimes. Like, and it wasn't like that initially, but they started kind of slowing down around this time with Imaginarum. But anyway, let's get back into some of the drama surrounding Imaginarum. I'm just going to let you guys look at some of my paintings real quick, because I got to grab something real quick. I'll be right back. To make sure I got all my chargers. Make sure we're still recording here. We're going on an hour and 9 minutes. We're going strong. So where do we kind of leave off? You know, during I talked about how it takes Nightwish a really long time to make albums, which I think is really cool in one way because it shows that the band is taking their time. But I do think it's kind of hurt them sometimes because fans are waiting for a new record, and like sometimes we have to wait years and years and years. But that's kind of what it sort of forms an awesome mystery behind the scenes of Nightwish, and that's part of what makes Nightwish interesting. But having said that, I think they could have benefited from being a little bit more prolific. But anyway, by the time we got to Imaginarum, we're sort of drifting away from the era of Dark Passion Play. You know, the initial novelty of Annette being in the band and sort of their new sound is kind of starting to wear off. Nobody really knew, like, I mean, I'm not saying that like it wasn't good, but I'm saying that like there were probably really high expectations. People were really trying to figure out what direction they were going to go in. Were they going to sort of continue in sort of this, you know, more pop metal type of sound? I'm not saying that that's what they were doing, but just vocally it sort of elevated Nightwish. My cat's going ape shit. Annette Osland's vocal sound and her style sort of elevated Nightwish to this. They sort of took them out of this sort of maybe niche operatic power metal sort of sound, gothic sound, and sort of elevated them into this more like, I don't want to say mainstream, but because they're not necessarily mainstream, but they were more like a folk metal rock band or something with really heavy elements and still some gothic power metal elements, but it's not the same Nightwish that we had originally, right? And that's what's interesting about Nightwish is that they're constantly changing, and maybe that's why they're interesting. But anyway, they had some drama during the recording of Imaginarum. Like, I guess Marco Hatalia was supposed to do some like in-person duets with Annette Osland, but they never came to fruition because Annette Osland had some issues, and we don't exactly know what those issues were. But you know, I think her relationship, maybe situation was difficult, or maybe, you know, less than ideal or something. But and then again they made another documentary, guys. Here we go again. Nightwish made another documentary about the making of this album, which it was actually a really, really great documentary, and they went into the history of every single band member, including Annette. So there was really no inkling that Annette was going to get fired or anything like that. But yeah, the cat's out of the bag. They're going to fire this vocalist too, right? But it was a really cool documentary because they showed like baby pictures of all the band members and like talked about how they got into music. It was just a really cool documentary, but there was another weird part with Annette where there was a weird story concocted about the reason that she didn't show up to some of the recording sessions was that she was playing at home with her son and she tripped on a toy and fell. Like, you know, you just can't make this up. It's like, really? I'm not saying that like that story in itself is like, you know, a bad story, but it's like there's obviously something else going on there. You know, there was something going on in the Annette camp, and there was something going on in the Nightwish camp. And obviously they all needed a big break after Dark Passion Play. You know, they toured for like almost 3 years and all this kind of stuff. But why did it take them, you know, so long? I think they actually started recording Dark Passion Play like in maybe late or maybe early 2010. So it took them like at least over a year. By the time the release date, it was like a whole year later, but I'm sure it took them almost a year to make the album. Maybe I'm sure Tuomas started writing the songs like maybe late 2009 or something like that. But anyway, there was some drama there, obviously, but they had this new image, you know. And what's interesting about this album in particular is that they made this whole movie that came out with it. And I think it was a little bit much. I don't think we really needed a Nightwish movie necessarily, you know, but I haven't really gone back and watched it. But they were trying to like emulate like Pink Floyd The Wall or something, you know, like that they're not similar albums, but they were trying to sort of, you know, create this image of, a movie that would go along with the album, or the album that would go dovetail really nicely with an epic movie. And I think they did that pretty well, but did we really need a Nightwish movie in that style? Like, maybe not. They've done so many documentaries. So they had a documentary about this album, and then they had an album, obviously, and then they had a movie called Imaginarium. It's actually a pretty compelling movie that sort of dovetails loosely with a lot of the lyrics that Tuomas wrote, and maybe Marco wrote some of the lyrics. I know he wrote some of the songs, but I will say that Imaginarium, like I said, we'll go back to the actual album itself, is a brilliant album, and I do think it's sort of the last real Nightwish album as we know it from their old sound. To me, the old Nightwish is kind of Tuomas writing about the dead boy. And if you're a Nightwish fan, you'll kind of know what the dead boy is all about. And it's sort of like Tuomas's emotional landscape. We hear about snow and owls and the Finnish countryside and a little bit of mythology and like cold lakes and like, it's just this very evocative, fantasy-esque sort of world that Tuomas creates for us. But during this tour, not long into it, maybe less than 6 months, there was something rotten in the state of the Imaginarium tour, and allegedly they were all sick. They all had the flu or something, and that probably wasn't helping. Can you imagine being on tour, getting sick? It must be terrible. But make a long story short, Annette wasn't feeling too well, and it's a rumor that she was pregnant. I guess they're pretty sure she was pregnant. Annette Olsland here was pregnant. So there was some drama, and she wasn't feeling well, I guess. And obviously there are some other things in the Annette camp that are sort of worth discussing, that maybe we'll get into before the end of this. But there was some tensions building because Annette wanted her own tour bus. And she was basically saying that I need some time off because I might be pregnant. I'm going to be having kids or something to that effect. And they were touring, this was actually kind of interesting because I live in America, but I wasn't able to really hit some of their shows. I probably could have if I had to travel a couple states over rather. But they were actually touring in the U.S. when Annette was fired. I think they were scheduled to play in Denver actually, but Annette was sick and she was rushed off to the hospital, allegedly, either from complications of the flu or from being pregnant or something, or maybe she just didn't want to play the show. She was trying to see like what was going to happen, and we'll never really know for sure, right? Like nobody really knows. Just lowering my chair here a little bit. Nobody really knows for sure what actually transpired, right? That'll kind of just, it gets lost to time. But so basically, what did Nightwish do in that situation? They decided to continue the show, and basically, Tuomas and Troy here, this guy, I'm circling my mouse around him. Troy, he looked a lot different then. His hair is a little longer, but Tuomas here and Troy basically took to the stage before the show was about to go down, and Troy basically says something to the effect of, and he sounds like a total tool when he says this, but he's like, we have some potentially terrible news for you all. Annette Olsland is allegedly sick and is being rushed off to the hospital and in terrible condition or something, and it's like, just the tone of his voice and like his demeanor seemed a little bit like demeaning maybe, and I don't know, maybe I'm just taking it out of context or something, but it does seem like they were trying to either embarrass Annette or they were just maybe reacting to some of the issues they were having with her. And I think they were kind of backed into a corner because they didn't want to cancel any shows, but there's also speculation that Tuomas and some of the other guys in Nightwish were already sort of, I don't think it was the other band members. I would assume it's probably either Tuomas, and we'll talk about this Troy fella here. We'll talk a little bit about him in a second here, because he did sort of change the trajectory and he changed the creative vision for Nightwish forever, in my opinion. I'm not saying it was all his influence, but but you can kind of see this weird brotherly dynamic that took place between Troy Donockley, the pipe player. He plays like the Celtic pipes or whatever, and Tuomas Holopainen. And there's some footage of them, and then I believe then they proceeded to make another documentary called "Learn the Set List in 48 Hours," and this came out like maybe a year or 6 months after Annette was fired, right? But again, we have this sort of documentation of band drama that later comes true, and Annette is not even on this documentary because allegedly they tried to film her or something, but she, after all the shit hit the fan or whatever, she said, like, please don't put me in the DVD. Or maybe there was a lot of footage of her on there making her look bad and stuff, which is what I presume. But it's really weird what goes on with the Nightwish documentaries. It's like, and maybe it's just like a sort of like a reality type show thing, like they're just documenting, like, you know, the drama about their band or something. But it does seem a little bit of a conflict of interest, and it seems like they should be focusing more on less of like recording these image-based, drama-based documentaries and more focused on just playing and touring and practicing and stuff, which I'm sure they do. I mean, I'm sure the documentary is kind of probably like the last thing that they think of, but maybe I think they are very well aware that their fans enjoy sort of this documentary, in-depth sort of fisheye lens, I guess you could say, of the Nightwish drama. I mean, of course the fans like it. We wouldn't be making this video if I didn't think it was interesting. But I do think it's kind of harmed them in some ways, and I would suspect that they didn't really treat Annette all that honorably in that situation. But like I said, there's according to Tuomas and some of the other players, you know, Annette was kind of becoming a diva. She wanted her own tour bus, and you know, she was making all these demands, and I guess there was speculation that she was going to, you know, give birth or something, but she didn't want to collaborate or work with them to get another singer. Or maybe she did, but there's speculation that she did not want this woman, Floor Jansen, to take her place under any circumstances because, well, let's face it, Floor Jansen is an amazing metal vocalist. She did not really fit, Floor Jansen did not fit the style of Nightwish at that time. Like, she's not the same vocalist as Annette. I mean, obviously, Floor Jansen is, for the long term, maybe a better fit for live performances. But personally, I would take Annette Olsland's vocals over Floor Jansen's. And I know that's a very controversial opinion. As amazing as Floor is, you know, there was just something really, really special that they had with Annette. But maybe it just wasn't, like, feasible long term, right? Maybe there was too much drama, or maybe they wanted to take their songs into an even more complex metal direction. So basically, they made another documentary called "Learn the Set List in 48 Hours" or whatever. So we're like on the 5th or 6th Nightwish documentary, documenting their own personal turmoil and their drama and stuff like that. So we had that, and then you know, they basically fired Annette, and Annette went on her website or her blog, and there was a little bit of back and forth between Nightwish and Annette for a number of months. It lasted maybe even a couple of years. I don't think they ever really officially reconciled. But anyway, this was basically the new Nightwish. This is actually not the entire new Nightwish. Let me type in Nightwish 2000. What is it? Nightwish. What year was that? I want to say it was 2015. I typed in the wrong number there. Okay, so let me see. Nightwish 2000. Let's type in Nightwish 2014 just so we can kind of cover all of our bases here. All right, so here's a good picture of Nightwish in 2014. Obviously, it's the semi-original lineup, but around the time of, this is sort of where we get into the original drummer, Yuko Navalian, and also we get into Troy Donockley here. What time is it? I think my cat's ready to eat here. I'm going to make him wait a little bit longer. So obviously we had the lineup change with Annette Olsland. Annette Olsland's out of the picture now, and they've proceeded with the tour with Floor Jansen. And this is almost like old Nightwish history now, because we're going on, what, like over 10 years now almost. Like all this shit went down in 2012. So now we're 13, 14, 15, 16. But we're going to rewind a little bit, because by the time we got to I want to say it was early 2014, or even it might have been late 2013, but they actually hired the Troy Donockley, the guy that we were talking about earlier, the guy that plays the Celtic pipes or whatever. He was actually brought on along with Floor, maybe a little bit after, maybe a little bit before, as a full-time member, which was kind of cool. But like I said, it immensely changed the dynamic and the lyrical direction and even the sound of the band. So they got this new lineup, right? But just as they had this new lineup with Floor Jansen and Troy Donockley, the original drummer, the pirate-looking dude that we talked about earlier, he has a terrible insomnia problem. So right around the time of 2015, he kind of jumped ship, like during the first couple of months of recording their upcoming album, which eventually became Endless Forms Most Beautiful. The original drummer, which I love the most, jumped ship because he can't cure his insomnia problem. So again, just more problems in the Nightwish camp. And I don't think there's any like nefarious, behind the scenes issues going on there with him. I think he genuinely just wanted out. Maybe he was tired of the drama, but I think mostly he was just tired of like touring. It was making him sick. The guy worked his ass off, and he looked like he was really fucking sleep deprived too, like if you look at him. But he's my favorite Nightwish drummer. He always will be. I never got to see him in concert with Nightwish. We'll talk a little bit about my Nightwish concert experience maybe at the end of this really long-winded video. I'm a little worried how long this video is going to be, if it's even going to upload. It's going to take like 2 days. Okay, so this is tough. Okay, so now we have, just assuming this guy's not in the picture yet, we have this lineup here. Okay, so this is the lineup that proceeded from 2015 on to 2021, I believe. And we'll talk a little bit about Marco's departure, but this is like the Endless Forms Most Beautiful lineup, as well as the Human Nature lineup. I'm not going to spend too much time on Endless Forms Most Beautiful. It was a pretty good album. Like I didn't really want to listen to it at first when it first came out. And I pretty much went back to Imaginarium because I was kind of like rebelling against the new lineup changes. And they had a new drummer, and that's Kai Hutto here from Winter Sun. And he's actually who I saw them play live with back in 2018. But anyway, on Endless Forms Most Beautiful, again, we had a new version of Nightwish, a revamped version. And Floor used to be in a band called Revamp, as well as, I forgot what her other projects were. But we still had Marco, right? And so in many ways, it was still pretty much Nightwish, apart from, the fairly recent vocalist change from Annette Olsland to Floor Jansen, and she's actually a Dutch musician, a Dutch singer. Empu looks like a little hobbit here, doesn't he? He's really short. And then we had the lineup change with the drummer. Now we have this guy here. He's another Finnish musician from Winter Sun, like I said. And then roughly a couple years before that, we had the addition of the Celtic pipe flute player or whatever, Troy Donockley. So it's kind of a new Nightwish, but we still got Marco, still got Tuomas, and we still got Empu. But we can kind of see where the dynamic of the band is shifting, and there's something to be said for lineup changes. Like, as much as people like to ignore lineup changes, they do kind of affect the sound of the band, they affect the look of the band, they affect the vibe of the band, they affect the energy of the band, and they affect the chemistry. And all these musicians still really worked really well together. And I saw this lineup live that you're seeing right here with Troy, Marco, Floor, Tuomas, Empu, and Kai. And I mean, it was really solid, but I don't think that Kai Hutto has the same sort of stage presence that Jukka Navalanian brought to the band. You know, the pirate guy back there just rocking out, and he like, you know, always twirling his sticks, and he just had this element of showmanship that was just fit perfectly with Nightwish. And then by the time we got to Kai Hutto, he uses bigger sticks, and I think he's a little bit of a more like a rock drummer, and he hits really hard and he's good. But all he really does is he just kind of like moves his like elbows like this, but he doesn't really have like a lot of stage sort of allure or stage charisma. I mean, like, he's charismatic, don't get me wrong, but he's not Jukka Navalnian. I mean, it's like trying to compare, you know, organic to non-organic or something, you know. And he's a really good drummer for Winter Sun and some of his other projects, but I'm not sure he's necessarily the best drummer for Nightwish. For some reason they picked him because he was like the drum tech or whatever. He was like Jukka Navalnian's drum tech, so like I guess he was just like, it made sense to get Kai Hutto in the band. And now also, in addition to that, we have Troy Donackley, right? Like, he was featured on, I think Troy Donackley played as far back as maybe Century Child or either Once. He was obviously on Once in songs like, what songs was he on from that album? I can't remember. Or maybe he didn't show up till Dark Passion Play, but Troy Donackley, the flute player, he was a big element on, you know, Dark Passion Play and obviously Imaginarium. But they added him to the band, which is cool, but I don't know if it was necessary to necessarily have a Celtic flute player like full time in Nightwish. Like, it's a cool idea and it kind of fits with what they were going after, but like, I don't know, they had a little bit more of a metal aesthetic, I think, when it was just the four musicians, that being, or the three musicians rather, the drummer, the guitar player, and the keyboard player. And they've always had one guitar player, and then obviously they had the vocalist, so there was only four members on stage, so the energy was a little bit different. But now they got five members. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, now they got six. I'm sorry. So yeah, I was wrong about that. So I meant, yeah, how did I forget about Marco? So originally it would have just been the drummer, the keyboard player, that being Tuomas, obviously the guitar player, and then the bass player. So they had four musicians in addition to the vocalist, which made five stage members. But now they have six. So it's just getting a little bit into the element of like a carnival. You know, there's just so many people on stage and stuff, and it's cool. They have a really great sound, and I saw them with this lineup. But anyway, let's rewind a little bit back to Endless Forms Most Beautiful, because this was the sort of like the Floor era of Nightwish. Floor Jansen, the new vocalist, came into the band. It looks like she's the tallest one in the band too. There was some speculation going around that she was like transgender or something. I don't really believe it, but she is kind of masculine, but she's also really feminine too, which is pretty cool. But anyway, basically the sound stayed relatively the same, but it was a little bit different. I would say it was a little bit toned down, like was in some areas. And I would say that a lot of the songs on Endless Forms Most Beautiful sort of felt like rehashed versions of material they had already done on like albums once, and even Dark Passion Player. There were some new elements there. They had some beautiful songs. They had some really great heavy metal songs. And then they had, of course, the epic Endless Forms they had the epic, what's that long song at the end of it? The Greatest Show on Earth, which is a really cool song. But that album, I think kind of in my personal opinion, just as a fan, where it kind of fell short was in the lyrical direction. All of a sudden, we were sort of meant to accept this new scientific, biological, Darwinian version of Nightwish, right? Like all the stuff about the winter was gone, and all the stuff about the dead boy was gone, and all the stuff about Tuomas's sadness was gone, and all the stuff about the fantasy was way gone, and it was pretty much this sort of tribute to evolution and sort of Darwinism and the universe, cosmic chaos, the planetary systems and evolution, and it just got a little bit weird. Like, it was really cool, and I was really heavily interested in it for a short time, but I never really went back to Endless Forms Most Beautiful. Like, I can still enjoy the songs and stuff like that, but it's hard for me to get into that mindset, because the lyrical content of, I'm not saying like that the full trajectory of Endless Forms Most Beautiful is like that scientific stuff only, because there is a lot of emotional elements about family and love and stuff like that, but it's not the same sort of timeless classic Nightwish that I can go back to with the older albums and enjoy on just a really personal sort of existential level. And maybe that'll change with time or something, and maybe the album will grow on me or whatever, but it's a little bit structured too much on scientific literature and scientific theory and stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of that was. Maybe that was like Tuomas sort of shedding all of his depression from the earlier years. Maybe he's just growing up. We can't expect bands and songwriters to stay the same forever, right? But I think something was lost from Imaginarum to Endless Forms Most Beautiful. That's just my opinion. Like, the songs just, some of them, most of them, in fact, kind of sound like rehashed versions of stuff, and they don't really play much of that material live, really, that I'm really aware of. Like, they have a couple hits that they do from that album, and it's a good album, but and maybe in some ways it was like their first training ground with Floor Jansen and Kai and Troy. It was like the first album with the new lineup, so maybe we couldn't expect like a huge epic esoteric masterpiece like we had with Imaginarum or Dark Passion Play, but they were onto something so special with Annette. And then all of a sudden, they just kind of expected everybody to accept this big change. And nobody really protested. Everybody really likes Floor for some reason. And I think she's a great metal vocalist and all that stuff, but I don't think she's necessarily the best vocalist for Nightwish. Like, is that a possible theory? And I'm saying this from a fan that's seen her play live with them, and they were phenomenal. She sounded great. But I think Nightwish had something really special with Tarja, number one. Like, that sort of formed the whole emotional, sad, sort of operatic, gothic thing. And then what they had with Annette was like more like this sort of type of innocence that came into the music with Annette's beautiful voice that kind of sounded like one of the singers from ABBA or something like that. That's just what I compare her to. I'm not saying she necessarily sounds like that. But there was like, it still fit with the whole Nightwish aesthetic because her voice was so angelic. And then by the time we got to Floor, like, I think Floor would be better suited for like maybe a really epic folk death metal, blackened epic thrash metal band or something, and she fits really well with Nightwish too, don't get me wrong, but there's like an emotional, her vocals are so skilled on a technical level that there's a little bit of a lack of an emotional sort of element there, I think, at least on recordings and stuff like that. I don't know, and sometimes some of the vocal patterns and stuff she does, I don't think are not necessarily the vocal patterns, but like she has a weird like little thing that she does with her voice. I think that sometimes sounds a little bit corny, like when it's not screaming, but it's like on the sort of the threshold of screaming. And like Annette, she never tried to scream, and Tarja, she never tried to scream either. I think that was kind of interesting. And maybe Floor needs to go all the way and just do like a death metal, really heavy death metal song with Nightwish, or just maybe not try to do the real heavy sort of growling vocals at all. I don't know. This is just me kind of speculating and just putting my opinion out there. Okay, so by the time we're fast forwarding into some other Nightwish drama, by the time we get to 2020 or 2021, this was about a year after the pandemic, and Nightwish was pretty much on standby like most bands were at that time. But by the time things started to kind of unlock, by the time, you know, what's his face, you know, Dictator Fauci sort of opened the gates for people to start, you know, living their lives again, it was kind of far too late. And Marco Hatalia here decided that he no longer wanted to tour or be in Nightwish. He wanted out. And he posted an open letter on his Instagram and maybe his website sort of detailing the reasons for this. And he wanted to sort of, he just couldn't take it anymore. There were some weird things that were said in that open letter. You know, he talked about the tensions between Nightwish and the record companies, and he talked about some of the you know, just all kinds of really esoteric things. And then he said, like, to blame Tuomas for this situation is, you know, insulting his and mine intelligence or something. Just really weird stuff that some people thought was kind of unnecessary. But like, we could unpack the whole Marco letter in another video, as well as the Tardia letter. So again, we had another Nightwish lineup change, and then we're back to where we started. I'm just going to close out of all this other stuff. So here we're pretty much back to square one, and we have this new guy called Jukka Koskinen, who is, like I said previously, a former member of Winter Sun. I'm not really sure if Winter Sun is still a thing right now, because it seems like Nightwish is slowly being engulfed by Winter Sun. You know, like in 10 years, like it's going to be just Tuomas, and all the other members are going to be like ex-Winter Sun members or something. It's going to be called like Winter Wish. You know, who knows what's going to happen. And even this is going to be kind of the tail end of this video here, but I just did want to address, we talked about the lyrical change of Nightwish, which I really miss. I don't really like this direction they're going in with all this scientific propaganda. And then and this is where we sort of get into Troy Donackley here, because I do think Troy Donackley started getting into Tuomas's ear about something, or maybe Tuomas was ready to change lyrical musical content. I don't know, but allegedly this Troy Donackley character started feeding Tuomas this very sort of atheist type of historical literature, you know, literature and obviously history books, very heavily based on evolution and maybe anti-Christianity. And Tuomas Holopainen and Troy Donackley actually went on camera and basically denounced Christianity and basically said that Nightwish was now openly secular and all this other kind of hogwash that was, in my opinion, entirely unnecessary, because, you know, they probably alienated a lot of their fans by doing it. And it was just weird, because Nightwish has always kind of used Christian imagery in a beautiful way, like all throughout their album trajectory. But this change that took place, like I said, on 2015 with Endless Forms Most Beautiful, I think was heavily influenced by this Troy Donackley character right here. I think he was I think he's, maybe it's yet to be seen, but I do think he's a little bit of a, you know, an overly influential force in the Nightwish camp, you know, and who knows, maybe there's other reasons why other members left, maybe due to some of the dynamics between Tuomas and Troy Donackley, you know. And, you know, like I said, when I saw him play in Virginia in 2018, they put on an amazing show, and I'll never forget it. And, like, I don't have any complaints about their musical performance or anything like that. But like, if I could pull all the strings of Nightwish, I would ditch the whole scientific anti-Christian evolution thing, you know, and like, because they're going in really weird, like, sort of New World Order directions, which I never thought Nightwish would do, you know. hopefully they're not going to start like promoting vaccines or some bullshit like that. But I would just really like to see them go back to what they were good at. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me know in the comments if you would like to see Nightwish go back to what they were good at. Like when they talked about the dead boy and they talked about being sad and being heartbroken. And like, obviously, Two of Us can't do that forever, right? Like he wrote his Scrooge McDuck album and all that stuff. And maybe he got that all out of his system. And now it's time to, focus on this epic, grandiose, scientific, Darwinian theme he's trying to construct. But I think they've kind of lost the plot. They came out with their other album from 2020 or 21. It came out in 2020, I think. Human Nature, which was kind of like the sequel to Endless Forms Most Beautiful, and the second part of the album was just like acoustic keyboard music that Tuomas wrote, which I don't think anybody's really listened to since. I listened to a little bit of it. It was pretty cool. I'd like to go back and listen to it. And the album as a whole, the metal part of the album, like the first part, Human, was way better than Endless Forms Most Beautiful. It still has some songs on there that I like, but even as a whole, it just didn't have that power that Imaginarium does, or that Dark Passion Play does, or Century Child, or Once, or Ocean, or any of that. So in my opinion, they've kind of fallen a little bit flat. And this is from a listener that's tried to go back again and again and again and again. And I've tried to like really let those newer albums sink into my system, and it just doesn't cut it for me. Like I can enjoy them. Like I really like Endless, like the one song that they featured Marco on vocals with. And that's another thing on Human Nature, and even with Endless Forms Most Beautiful, Marco slowly kind of got faded out. Like he was featured more on Endless Forms Most Beautiful, right? He did quite a few songs on there. But by the time we got to Human Nature, like I was listening to the whole album, just getting all pumped up to hear Marco, and he's not even on it. I think he's on it, but like they had this new thing on Human Nature where the Floor, Marco, and Troy. Now Troy's doing vocals too, which is kind of weird. But all of a sudden they were all doing harmony, so you couldn't really tell who was actually singing. But Marco was featured on the last song, like really the last fucking song. Like maybe that's pretty epic in a way because it's Marco's last like ode with Nightwish. But it's a song called Endless. But you can tell there's a pain in Marco's voice, and he sounds like he's just straining, and you can hear he's depressed and he doesn't want to be in this band anymore. It's actually quite sad. But it's this really interesting, haunting, beautiful song about basically the going into a black hole when you die or when you're born, and just this whole idea of nothingness. But there's almost like this nihilistic element that came into Nightwish, I think, when Troy joined the band. And this is all speculation, I'm sure. I mean, Tuomas has been a marine biologist since he was like a little kid, right? So most of this maybe came from Tuomas's just willingness to go in a different direction, which I think is cool. But I'm not buying it. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of the old school Nightwish followers are really buying it either. But I can't help but think that Troy Donockley here was maybe a little bit of a negative influence, trying to maybe hijack the creative vision of Nightwish. So that's just kind of my personal opinions. And recently, to kind of close out things, the final drama in Nightwish, if it ever ends, is that, like I said, Marco Hatalia left, and there was some speculation that they were going to quit, but they ended up not quitting, and they hired this other guy, and then they did a digital concert, which was allegedly better than anybody else's digital. It was like a digital concert during COVID. And I really think that whole trajectory of COVID like really fucked up Nightwish on a lot of different levels, because I think it not only did it hurt Marco, or maybe it just brought a lot of things to the forefront, and Marco realized like maybe this is not the right band for me, because obviously now he's out touring again. So that it's a little hypocritical on his part. Like he's like, oh, he took like a year off or whatever, right, to recover. But then now he's like he's out touring and he's playing and he's doing a solo project now. So that leads me to believe that it wasn't that he didn't really want to be in a band. He just didn't want to be in Nightwish anymore. It's probably a lot of responsibility. It doesn't necessarily mean that there was anything nefarious going on with Nightwish specifically, but he didn't want that responsibility. He wanted something a little more that he could control the shots. But now Floor Jansen was pregnant and she had a couple of kids, and it's weird that they never fired Floor Jansen for being pregnant, but for some reason they decided to, fire Annette for being pregnant or whatever, or having issues. It's like, and that's the whole thing with even the fan base of Nightwish. It's like Floor Jansen can do no wrong, and obviously there's a little bit different of a personality. She's not a diva. She seems like a very, very genuine person, a very, very genuine musician. She loves being in Nightwish, unlike Tautia, who kind of became spoiled and maybe a little bit disillusioned. And then even Annette sort of had some maybe personality, attitude issues. But I do think that Nightwish has a lot of explaining to do, and I think they should explain it. I think it would be very engaging, and I would love to see Nightwish do an album featuring all their vocalists and all their former members. But basically the last part of the Nightwish drama is that they're no longer going to be touring. They're basically taking a break after and that's partially why we made this video, is because Nightwish has one more album, at least in the foreseeable future, that they're working on right now. It's going to be out maybe in the next 6 months or something like that, maybe a year. But they're pretty much done recording it, and it's supposed to be released maybe in the next couple of months or whatever. But they're not going to be touring it, from my understanding. They posted an open letter on their Instagram and their website basically saying to preserve the long-term, sort of quality and trajectory of this band, we're not going to be touring. And that's kind of where that's kind of where the Nightwish story ends. Now it kind of waits to be, we have to wait to see what's going to happen with their next album. What's it going to sound like? Is it going to be any better? Is it going to be any worse? But I've seen some live footage of this new lineup, and it kind of pales in comparison, and I'm sorry to say that, but it really pales in comparison without Marco and without Yuka and without Annette, and there's been too many lineup changes. It's not to say, like, I'm sure I'll get the album, I'm sure I'll listen to it, and I'll probably rock out to it for a couple of months, but is it really going to stick with me long term, like Oceanborn or like Angels Fall First or Once or Century Child or Imaginarium or Dark Passion Play? I doubt it, but maybe it'll be a really good Nightwish album. So I think we'll close out this video here. Please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Please follow me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official. Send me an email at andrewmarlowe22@gmail.com. And I hope you guys enjoyed this really in-depth expose documentary about Nightwish. Wouldn't call it a documentary, but I would call it more of an opinion-based analysis. And we'll talk to you guys real soon.